Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today I am happy to bring you this Peugeot e-208. Now, if I didn't tell you this was an e-208, you might not have guessed at all, apart from maybe this stupid green blob that they have to put on number plates these days. But this is besides the point. Big thank you, by the way, to Peugeot, PSA, or should that really be Stellantis these days? But anyway, back to the point. This is still a Peugeot 208, which to a lot of people wanting to buy their first EV is a huge thing. A lot of EVs, for better or for worse these days, seem to have it that they have to look different, that they have to obviously shout that they're electric. This Peugeot is just a handsome Peugeot, and I do mean that it is handsome. Peugeots these days do really well with their design. They're sharp and they're obviously French, and they're just so much different from the German counterparts. From the side here, I'm not the biggest fan, mainly because of these black wheel arches. They make the 17-inch wheels look tiny when they're not. I think the car is lifted slightly. It does look a little bit higher than a standard Super Mini. That is probably to accommodate the batteries. But it's definitely from the front, I think, where the e-208 looks the best. It's sharp, it's meaningful, and the lion tooth design LEDs really look distinctive in the best way possible. You come around, nice 17-inch wheels with Michelin tyres. You can see quite large brakes for a Super Mini there. And then round the back, I think it's a bit more bulbous than the previous 208, but on the flip side, that does give you quite a bit more room. If we look inside the boot, it's quite large for a Super Mini. Of course, we have the charging cables and whatever you might need to charge this thing back up. Unfortunately, you do not have a front boot. If I just pop the bonnet, yeah, it looks quite like an engine, to be honest with you. I kind of thought there might have been a small bit of storage in here, but there isn't really any. I assume that's where the motor is. You can see down there's some orange cables for the high voltage things. But anyway, let's get inside, because that's where it really matters. You climb in, and the first thing you think is, wow, this is really nice, especially for a Super Mini. It's different, and it's distinctively different, I think, from the German counterparts. We have lots of angle designs, sharp contours. Not a big fan of this fake carbon fibre, but I'm sure you can spec that differently. We have a lot of piano black here, which does smudge easily and it does catch dust. I don't know if it picks up on camera, but I've only had this car a couple of days and it's already covered in a load of fingerprints and dust, but you know, I guess it looks nice. We have a huge 10-inch touchscreen. Let's just turn the car on so we can actually see it. Quite nice. It's like a matte design screen. The graphics are okay, I think. They could be better, I reckon. A friend of mine actually told me that the graphics remind him of an old Android tablet, and I never thought that until I saw it, and I thought, oh yeah, Android 3.0 Honeycomb, which came out 10 years ago. You have Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Unfortunately, those two don't actually fill the whole screen and look nice. The climate things are always there, so it does look a little bit naff, but for the most part it is pretty good to use. Not a fan of this, not a fan of having to use climate control on the screen. I think that's a bad industry trend, and the sooner that changes the better, to be honest with you. These capacitive buttons there for the main functions are, I'm just going to say it, terrible. I'm not a big fan of capacitive buttons because it does not give any feedback at all. And also from my driving position, now this is a bit of a problem for me specifically, because I am quite tall and I do have quite a lot of legs. I can't reach. I can't reach either the touchscreen or the buttons, not even the toggle switches, without actually physically leaning forward, which makes for quite an annoying experience. But for the capacitive buttons, you can do a 3-finger tap and it comes up with the main things that you might need. So that's not too bad. Further down we have a wireless charging point for your mobile phone. This is the higher end GT line, so you do get things like the bigger screen, the wireless charging, and this fancy 3D instrument display. And now I don't think the camera will pick up the fact that it's 3D, but basically there's 2 layers to the display, and if you look around, it moves around. I mean, it's a gimmick, it doesn't really add anything to the information you're seeing, but it's a nice bit of eye candy at the end of the day. This is still a Super Mini, so further down we do have scratchy plastics, but you know, it's to be expected. Yeah, no damping there, and of course, this being a French car, the glove box is tiny, but that's how Peugeots have always been. And you can tell this is a car designed for Europeans, basically, or left-hand drive at the very least, because volume knob all the way over there, like, it's clearly designed for a driver over there. You know, you'd think that they could at least move the volume knob over here for the British market. But we do have steering wheel controls, so it's not too bad. But generally, yeah, it's a really nice place to be. It's different in the good way, but like how form over function works, sometimes this design does come at the expense of some practicality, i.e. with these capacitive buttons. But overall, I like it here. It's a nice place to be. It makes me happy. Room in the back, I won't get in the back, but just take my word for it where I say it's very standard Super Mini. I've talked a lot now, so let's get driving. So we put your foot on the brake, we press the unlock button down here, we go into D and then put down the parking brake. The car jolts a little bit and then we're off in complete silence. It's jarring. So we cruise at 41 miles an hour here, and there is a bit of tyre noise, but there's no wind noise. And I think the thing is that because there is no engine noise, all your other senses are they're a lot more sensitive to things like tyre noise. In any other normal petrol engine car, this would be more than acceptable. Back roads and housing estate roads are basically what this car is made for, really. It's so simple. Just accelerate to the desired speed limit and just stay there. I would like to talk about this steering wheel. It's been a thing on Peugeots for a little while now, actually, in the fact that it's tiny and it sits below the instrument cluster, whereas more or less every other car has the instrument cluster come through, which is bizarre. It's tiny, but I don't mind it at all, actually. I think it works well. I'm just going to squirt through. Look at that, 30 straight away. This is the thing with electric cars. As we go over the bump there. This is the thing with electric cars. You've got to imagine having a normal petrol engine that's constantly in the power band. Imagine a petrol engine that's constantly sitting at 5,000 RPM, ready to go at all times. This is what having an electric car is like. From standstill, you've got all the power all the time. So while this car may only make a modest 136 brake horsepower, it feels like a lot more. Towards the higher speeds, the power does taper off quite a lot, probably down to the fact that this is only a single speed gear. But in town speeds, you feel almost invincible, to be honest, off the lights, because you don't have to worry about getting a good launch. You just put your foot down and the car does the rest for you. It's fantastic for that sort of thing. As we come to a stop, we take our foot off and the car regen brakes a little bit, but not aggressively. It feels quite similar to engine braking, to be honest. When you actually put your foot on the brake, that's something you definitely have to get used to be honest. Just got to be careful here. I'm just gonna go gently, gently. Hopefully nobody comes roaring. No, there we go, cool. Yeah, braking is something you have to get used to. The first time I picked up this car from the PSA Technical Centre, I made myself look like an idiot because I put my foot down at the normal pressure on the brake that I would in my Mini Cooper, and I almost went through the windscreen in front of all the people at the technical centre, so I made a great first impression. But the thing is, what the car does is that it uses the brakes obviously to regen and put some power back into the battery, but it has the side effect of making the brake feel quite spongy and inconsistent. Sometimes the brake will feel quite firm, other times it feels like it just goes straight to the floor, and this is all down to the regen. That was something that took a lot of getting used to. It feels very light, but importantly, you can get used to it. You know, we always think about how using driving to sort of take your mind off things. You know, you go for a drive to relax yourself a little bit. If you want to relax yourself a little bit, drive an electric car. It's definitely silent. We pull away gently. And that's the thing, the character of this car, it almost encourages you to drive slowly, calmly, peacefully. It doesn't want you to drive like a maniac. But yeah, it's these urban environments where this car performs really well because it has that regen braking, and because it has that regen braking, it puts power back in the battery and it actually acts really efficiently. So I've been getting constantly 3.5 miles per kilowatt hour, which doesn't sound like much if you're not used to measuring your efficiency with electric. But what that basically means is that on a domestic charger at home using your standard rates, you're probably only going to be paying about 4p per mile. Compare that to a typical petrol car where you'd probably pay about 10p per mile. The savings can quickly add up. And the weird thing is about this efficiency that you might not expect is that actually this electric car is more efficient around town than it is on an open country road. We're so used to, with normal cars, getting way better MPG when you're out on a gentle cruise on the back roads, whereas with this, you're miles better doing the sort of driving I'm doing right now. You're coming stop start, you're not really going much above 30. It's so good for that. I did a 120-mile round trip in this just to sort of test its long range ability, and yeah, it just didn't feel as comfortable. We're going to go on some faster roads in a minute, but you'll see what I mean when it doesn't feel quite right. Across some broken bumpy roads, the ride is good. It's quite soft. It's a very soft suspension setup, whether you like that or not. So it does iron out impurities in the road quite well, although if you go over some bigger bumps or potholes, then that can unsettle the car. It's not completely perfect in that sense. You can still get jolts through the suspension. We'll give it a burst of acceleration. Look at that. It's so nippy and quite boaty with the handling, but very sure-footed. Making use of some regen braking there. Go down Brandon Lane. Right, let's take it on some back roads. Nice 60-mile-an-hour limit. Foot down. And that's pretty much 60. Acceleration definitely tapers off once you get above 35-40, but it's still more than enough than you could ever need from a city car, really. It's an 8.1 second 0 to 60 time, and it has a top speed of 93. So that's more than enough. And as I go down these fairly twisty country roads, it's not incredibly twisty or technical, but it's twisty enough. It's not a sporty car. That's the instant impression you get. And it all comes back to the soft setup, really. It's just not made to go down twisty lanes quickly. And I'd imagine that, again, the weight of the batteries doesn't help its cause. But But on the flip side, we'll just avoid this in case it's something horrible. Yeah, on the flip side, it is really comfortable even when you do push it. And go this blind crest, quick left, quick right. Yeah, it's very boaty on a fast road. You can feel the suspension wallow like that a bit, which, you know, if you like your fast B roads, will not impress you. But if you like cruising, then yeah, this is immensely comfortable. Helped really well by these seats. They're very comfortable seats. But I'm not sure if you can see my range, but since we've done this quick road, the range has plummeted to 23 miles. And this is what happens. This car just does not like fast roads. We can't brake, we get all that regen energy back again for this tight blind corner. Yeah, this car just hates fast roads. Mainly, well, you're working the electric motor that much more, but also it doesn't have any opportunity when you're on the fast road to use that regen to make back some of that energy that you're using, and I think that makes a huge difference to the efficiency. So while you can get, you know, 3.5, maybe 3.7, 3.8 round town, realistically on the motorway you're only going to get about 3 to 3.2 miles per kilowatt hour, which, don't get me wrong, is still good and still very cheap with you know, when you plug it in at home. But if you're used to your car being more efficient on your motorway commute, then driving an EV like this will give you a surprise. When I did my 120 mile round trip, I actually found myself more relieved when I drove into towns, when I had to start and stop, because I knew that the car was more happy. More happy? That's terrible English. Happier. The car was happier with the slower speeds. And it still feels that way now. Hammond skip is in the way. I'll wait for this car and then we'll give it a burst of acceleration. Oh no, this van's moving quite quick. We will not give it a burst of acceleration. Or maybe we will anyway, because it is very addictive. There you go, 30, just like that. At the end of the day, while this acceleration is quite fun and it is quite childish, I do find myself missing my Mini. I think I do miss a good old manual gearbox. But if you're not bothered about that sort of thing, you know, if you're not a hardcore petrol head who loves the engagement, if you just want simple, easy urban driving, then you can't really go wrong. I always feel invincible when I pull off the traffic lights in this thing. It's only front wheel drive, but the traction control system in this is actually quite sophisticated. It doesn't feel like it holds you back too much. That, and it probably helps that the Michelin tyres on this thing are very good. They're very grippy, very sure-footed, and I think that's what helps it give its relative confidence on fast back roads. It's not fun and it's not sporty, but it is sure-footed and you don't feel that you're on the edge of grip all the time. So it does give you confidence even if it isn't particularly fun. Regen brake. Still, after 4 days, still getting used to finessing that brake pedal. Trying to balance between it regenning for you and actually wanting to apply some force. But you can definitely get there. I mean, I'm 95% used to it. And that's like, whee, that was nearly an accident. Oh, bloody hell. Yeah, I mean, you can definitely get used to it though. If I can get used to it after 4 days, then, you know, a long-term owner will be able to get used to it instantly. No problem at all. It is currently February at the moment, but this week has been nice weather. It hasn't been wet at all actually, and the temperatures have been around, I'd say between 10 and 15 degrees, which is, you know, quite pleasant. I've been averaging probably about 150, 160 miles from, I was going to say a tank. It's not a tank, it's a full charge, which I think is very respectable. But yeah, 150 to 160, I'd say, usable miles without, you know, trying to drive too much of like an eco-maniac, I think is usable, especially if you live in an urban environment. If you live in a big city like Birmingham or London, this is more than enough range for you, because around town it uses its range very slowly. It's only if you drive a lot on motorways where you have to do longer trips, you probably might find yourself wanting a bit more. For my 120-mile round trip, I did have to pre-plan. I charged it to 80%. I drove 60 miles down, and I just about had enough range to drive back, but I didn't want to have too much range anxiety, so I had to charge a little bit again for the return 60 miles. And you know, that's just one of those things that you wouldn't have to do in a petrol car. It's just not quite there yet. In a longer range car though, like a Tesla, obviously it wouldn't be a problem. But then that obviously naturally brings me on to the charging infrastructure. It's a mess. It's a hot mess. Unless you're not a user of the Tesla supercharger, you're going to have to deal with all these different companies that have all their different ways of making you sign up. They give all different charging rates, and they have different plugs, and yeah, it's just not a pleasant experience. So when the time came to charge this thing, I found myself always having to Google, you know, nearby chargers and whether they were compatible, and you know, whether I had to give my phone number and my email. Can you imagine having to give your phone number or email every time you wanted to fill your car up with petrol? It's mental. But with that being said, I did find some chargers. Both occasions where I had to charge this car up, I found a charger where you could just tap your contactless card and get charging, which is definitely a step in the right direction. But still, there's still a long way to go. There's still, you know, for every charger that just lets you do your contactless, there's loads where you have to do the whole sign up, download their app nonsense. So it still has quite a way to go, unfortunately, but I do have confidence that as time goes on it will get easier and easier, more simplified and more unified, which is what it needs, I think, for electrics to go truly mainstream. Well, we're approaching the end of our little drive now, so I guess I better wrap up my thoughts about this car, just to summarise. So in summary, I like it. I think it's a great car. I really like the fact that it's based on a normal car and it doesn't shout about the fact that it's electric. To a lot of people, that's really gonna matter. I mean, I know if I was in the market for an electric car, I don't want a car that shouts about that. I just want to blend in with traffic. I just want to be a car. I don't want to be shouting to the world about how I'm superior to everyone else, whether you think that or not. So the fact that this does just look like a normal Peugeot 208 really matters to a lot of people, including me. What else do I like? I love the design. I love the interior. I love the exterior. Even if it does mean with the interior that it, you know, it is form over function in many ways, that I can't reach things and some things are on the wrong side. And yes, there is still some cheapness, but that is to be expected in a city car. This car does cost over 30 grand, but I can imagine as time goes on that price will come down for an electric car. It's just the electric car battery tax effectively that you've got at the moment. It's just one of those things, but as the technology matures, then I can imagine the price coming very similar to a standard petrol or diesel version. So yeah, I like that. I really like the smoothness and the ease of driving in town. It's very easy to drive. There's no clunkiness at all. For the most part, it's quite honest about the range it has, and it's very comfortable, very comfortable. If you're into that sort of thing, it's amazing. That is a Citroen Ami. I don't know if I can turn around quickly. I don't know if you can see it in my rearview mirror. Lots of journalists have been reviewing the Citroen Ami recently because we're in Coventry and that's where it is based. But yes, things I don't like I say, some of the ergonomics could be improved. That reversing camera, there you go, is a bit naff. And it's not as good on a longer drive as you might expect. It's just not as happy. It's just not as happy on a longer drive as you might expect. It just eats up its range really quick. It could do with more range, to be honest, but overall, for making an electric car that's really accessible for the masses, I think Peugeot's done a brilliant job here. You've had cars like the Renault Zoe, but even they, you know, they still shout about the fact that they're an electric car just by being really different. This is basically, to the untrained eye, a Peugeot 208 that's electric. And I think for that in itself is a brilliant plus point.